Hey everyone, welcome back to the studio for the 5th installment of Improvise Like a Pro. In case this is the first video in this series you're catching, let me give you a little bit of background. These videos are essentially primer courses on what I think are some of the most important standards in the jazz rep. First, we'll learn the melody as a chord solo, and I'll do a full harmonic and technical breakdown of how I came up with this arrangement. Then, I'll take you guys through a set of chord voicings to practice your comping with, and in so doing, my hope is that you'll gain some insight into a more voice-leading centric approach to comping on the guitar. Finally, we'll take a look at an improvisation etude that I've written over the chord changes, and then I'll teach you some of my favorite licks step by step. This one is going to be a real doozy. Today, we'll be tackling a bebop classic by the one and only Charlie Parker with Confirmation. You guys ready? Let's get started. To start us off, I'll play through my arrangement of the melody, and then I'll take you through it phrase by phrase. This tune obviously has a much busier melody than the standards I've covered here in the past. The tempo is also much faster as well. As a result, my approach to playing this as a chord solo is markedly different than in past studies. Rather than trying to make the harmony as thick as possible, I decided instead to opt for an approach that would sound reminiscent of what a pianist might do in their left hand while playing the melody in the right. It was a real challenge to work this up, and I think you guys are going to have a lot of fun with this one. Have a listen to what it sounds like up to tempo first. I told you guys this one was going to be a doozy. Challenging left and right hand moments abound in this one, so take your time working it up. Let's break that down, and then we'll have a listen to it a little bit slower. This arrangement obviously has way more single note runs in it purely because of the busyness of the melody and the speed of the tune. I had to be really strategic in how I harmonized the moments I chose so as not to make it too difficult to play. For the first phrase, I chose to start out with a couple single notes and then harmonize this C note on the end of 1 with an F6 voicing. To get the next bit of the phrase to work, I had to slur this triplet here by just shifting up so I could land with a clean fingering and harmonize the E half diminished with this simple G minor triad on B1. Then I played single notes up until this C sharp, where I just played the 3rd and the 7th of the A7 because anything more would be much too cumbersome. The next melody note I got with this E diminished in place of A7. That pulled down super cleanly into this D minor 7. I chose to hit this small G7 voicing on the and of 3 to take up some rhythmic space, and when I put the A for the melody on top, it worked out to be a D minor 6 voicing, which I like for G7 anyway. That resolved into this little C minor triad to start off the next bit of the melody. Then we've got more single notes until I got this F on the and of 3. I just kept things simple again by playing a 3-note F7 with the root on the top. The next short phrase, I did almost entirely single notes until the last note, where I played this F minor 6 chord to stand in for the B flat 7. That worked out perfectly to put the A flat on top for the melody. I chose a similar strategy for the next little phrase, only harmonizing the point of resolution with this D minor 6 for a G7, since the melody note here is a push into the next bar. Then I played out the rest of the phrase with a single note and then harmonized the resolution with this partial D minor 6 chord, or B half diminished, however you want to see it. This strategy worked well again for the last phrase of the first A section. I played all single notes up until the point of resolution, where I grabbed this little E diminished triad to work as a C7 with the E on the top. To get me back to the top of the form, I played this C13 voicing into this C6. The second time through the A section, Bird changes the melody slightly. It's super busy, so I decided to keep the same strategy and harmonize only when he resolves. That landed me here on this really juicy A7 sharp 11 sound. It's technically happening over the E half diminished, but I hear it as being part of the dominant chord, and it just made sense to harmonize it that way since E flat doesn't fit in E half diminished at all. From there, I repeated the same material from the first A up until he changes the melody again here. This F in the melody made it really easy to grab this F minor 6, or D half diminished, as a sub for B flat 7. Then I played some single notes and resolved that phrase on this B flat 13 voicing. The last phrase I played, this little 3-note voicing for A minor 7, and then played out the melody until it resolved here on the end of 2. I'm seeing this as an F sharp diminished triad. Then I played this B flat triad on the end of 4 to give some rhythmic variety and avoid harmonizing right on the next downbeat. I played the rest of the melody out and then finished up with this F6. Getting into the bridge, I played this B diminished into E flat 6. Then it's all single notes up until this E flat diminished to stand in for F7 flat 9. Again, I'm harmonizing only at the point of resolution because the melody is so incredibly busy. This next phrase was a treat though, since I could actually harmonize a little bit more. I started off with B flat 6 with 1 note borrowed for the melody, and then resolved it before playing this G flat diminished into B flat 6 to finish the phrase. Then I did a little comping and just moved this voicing chromatically by a half step to get me into B flat major 7 territory. The next phrase is so incredibly busy that I couldn't find any space to harmonize or comp at all until here, where I could hit the root of A flat 7 with this A flat 13 voicing. The next little phrase is all single notes, but I decided to put a little stab on this B flat triad as a push into the G minor 7 that comes next. I harmonized the next phrase with this G minor triad and then played single notes until resolving here. This is where you actually have an option of things to do. It's technically possible to play a 3-note C7 here, but it's really difficult to get at tempo, so I opted in performance to just play this dyad of B flat and C to give you just enough of the sound, but if you're brave enough, you can add the E in the bass. The last A section plays out just the same as the first up until the 5th bar. On the end of 4, I played this A minor 7 again, and then played out the melody with single notes until resolving on the next end of 4 with this shell voicing for G minor 7, since it had the melody on top. Then I played 2 notes, followed by this G minor 6 with 1 note borrowed on top for the melody, and then a quick jump to this F6. I played the D by itself here, so the melody didn't get buried, and then I played the last 2 notes harmonized with the same F6. Here's what the whole arrangement sounds like, slowed down. Now, let's take a look at some chord voicings we can use to comp with. For this tune, I took a block chord approach and decided to let voice leading be my main concern when picking the next chord to use. Let's take a look at those voicings in depth together, and then you can try using them in your own accompaniments and vary the rhythm and melodic movements to make them really come to life. Starting off, I kept things pretty simple with these 2 voicings for F6. E half diminished, I played the standard grip that most of you probably know, but I used this funny fingering so I could get to the next voicing, an E diminished, without losing the sustain on too many notes. I kept using that weird fingering here for D minor 7, so I could do the same thing I did to the diminished into the D minor 6 I used in place of G7, like this. From there, I dropped down into a pretty normal voicing for C minor 7, and then jumped up into this voicing for C minor 6 in place of F7 to give me the sound of F9. That resolves down nicely into this F minor 6, or D half diminished, whatever you prefer, in place of B flat 7. Over A minor 7, I use this C6, which then resolves to this E flat minor 6 for D7 alt. That then comes down to this D minor 6 voicing in the first inversion for G7. I wanted to keep this A note on the top, so I let it hang there and then resolved the rest of the chord into this G minor 6 with the A note borrowed on top, giving me the sound of C13. The second A section, I started off with this C6 over the F that gave me the sound of F major 9. I used the same structure for the next 3 bars as I did in the first A, but I varied the inversions and voice leading slightly to give me some variety. Here are the chords I used: G minor 6, G diminished, F6, D minor 6, E flat 6, and C minor 6. The next 4 bars also got a similar structure as the first A section. Here's the voicings I used: F minor 6, C6, A minor 6, B flat 6. And this one is a more closely voiced G minor 6 with 1 borrowed note. And finally, F6. For the bridge, I decided to use mostly whole note voicings to let things breathe a little bit. I started out with this E flat 6 for C minor 7, C minor 6 for F7, and then these 2 voicings of B flat major 7. This one is F6 to give me the sound of B flat major 9, and then I follow that up with this B flat 6 with 1 borrowed note to get the major 7 sound. For the second half of the bridge, I used G flat 6 for E flat minor 7, E flat minor 6 with 1 note borrowed for A flat 7, A flat 6 for D flat major 7, B flat 6 for G minor 7, and finally G minor 6 with a note borrowed on top to get the C13 sound again. In the last A section, I started out with this F6. Then came this second inversion G minor 6 for E half diminished into E diminished in place of A7. To keep things moving upward, I use this F6 for D minor 7, and then this D minor 6 for G7. That resolved into this E flat 6 for C minor 7, and then I used an A diminished for an F7 flat 9 sound to get me into this F minor 6 in place of B flat 7. For the last 3 bars, I played this C6 for A minor 7, E flat minor 6 for D7 alt, B flat 6 for G minor 7, D flat minor 6 for C7 alt, and finally pulled up into this root position F6 to cap things off. Next up, we'll hear how these chords support the soloist when we learn the improvisation etude. Hope you guys are ready, because this one is going to be meaty. Now it's time to play through the improvisation etude. I really wanted this one to sound as close as possible to something that I'd actually improvise, so it's definitely on the more challenging side of things here on the channel. In case you haven't yet, I'd really encourage you to go check out my videos on pivot arpeggios and how to practice jazz standards. Those are going to give you a much deeper understanding of where I'm getting some of these phrases and how I go about connecting my ideas. You can find both those links down in the description of this video. Let's check out the whole etude up to tempo first, and then I'll pick apart a couple of key phrases for you to learn today. I told you guys there would be a lot to unpack in this one. For today, I've picked out just a couple of my favorite lines to go in depth on. Let's have a listen to the first one of those up to tempo one more time before we pick it apart in depth. Today's first selection is the first 5 bars of the A section. It's 5 bars and not 4 because I wanted to subvert the phrasing a little bit, and so I carried the end of the phrase all the way into the 5th bar. Here's how that worked. I started off with a pickup out of the melody, playing this enclosure to the root of the F6. Then I arpeggiated the F6, but displaced the last note so I could come down the scale and use an extra half step to resolve into the 7th of E half diminished on the downbeat. From there, I used a really bird-like triplet turn to help me play down the arpeggio. Then I pivoted to the resolution on the 3rd of the A7. From there, I just came down with 2 half steps to the 5th of D minor. There, I wanted to play diatonically up to the 7th of G7, so I just played up the scale, but used this leap of a 3rd so it worked out correctly. From there, I played this little cell into the C minor 7. It's kind of a C-sharp diminished triad going down into the C, but really, I was just thinking about voice leading here. It doesn't do much to describe the G7, except for the F on beat 3, but it does voice lead super clean by way of the descending half step to get into the root of the C minor 7, and I think it sounds pretty slick. Here I used a Barry Harris phrase, the one called 4 to be specific, to get the 3rd of F7 to land on beat 3. Then I jumped up to the 7th and came down the scale to the root of B flat. That then jumps down a 4th to the F, and I just walked up diatonically into the flat 7th to finish the phrase. Let's have one more look at that line under tempo. To finish out today's lesson, I'll teach you guys one more phrase from the solo. Here, check it out up to tempo first. This phrase also starts with a pickup, this time coming out of the 2nd A section. Again, I'm using a seemingly unrelated diminished triad to get into the next chord, but remember, I'm really concerned with the voice leading here. This A flat resolved really nicely into the 5th of C, so it doesn't really sound out of place, and it doesn't matter that this little pickup doesn't perfectly describe the F6 it's played over, since it's more about where it's going. When I got to the 5th of C, I played this little neighbor tone idea to get up to the 7th, and then I just came down the chord. From there, I pivoted to the 3rd of F, where I played another little 16th note triplet turn before playing a diatonic enclosure to the 7th of the F7 on beat 3. Then I came down the scale with 1 half step to get into the root of B flat right on the downbeat. From there, I played out the arpeggio displaced up an octave with a triplet, pivoted to the 6th, and then came down with 1 half step to the 3rd. This was a perfect opportunity to use another Barry Harris phrase to wrap things up. This time I used the phrase he calls 3 and ended my line with some syncopation on the 9th of B flat. Let's have one more listen to that line a little slower now. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me during my holiday break, and if you've made it this far, for watching all the way to the end of today's video. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of today's lesson. I'm also really curious what you guys were practicing while I was away, so get in touch and let me know about it. Also, make sure you like this video if you found it helpful, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell for notifications too. Things have gotten crazy busy here at the studio as of late, so this is likely going to be the only video for the month of January. I think I've given you guys enough material to keep you busy until February though. Until then, I'm going to be hard at work finishing my upcoming courses for truefire.com. If you've never checked out their site, you should really go give it a peek. There's so many amazing courses from fantastic artists and educators, and if you use my link down in the description, you'll get 35% off your purchase in addition to supporting yours truly. Patrons, don't worry, I'm still working on a couple of short bonus videos to keep you guys extra busy during my little break. If you're not a member of the studio yet and you're wondering what those bonuses might be, you should really go check out my Patreon page for more info. There, you'll also be able to find the PDF of all the material from today's lesson, in addition to every other video on the channel. If you'd rather support the channel through YouTube memberships, you can now do that as well. The same patron benefits for studio members are available right here on YouTube. All you gotta do is hit that join button if you're so inclined. A big heartfelt thanks goes out to all my incredible studio members. PH, Josh, David Zuckerbraun, Max Irwin, Everton Armstrong, Jay Jarek, Bill Jacob, Steven Schwartz, Jay Montana, Jim, Skemster, Cliff Berger, Jordan Schaefer, Tomas Jacobson, and Aaron Walters. An extra special thanks goes out to Jazz Luminaire patron Vibov Babadi. Thank you all so much for your continued support. A big thank you to all of you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.